All right, today as we continue to look at Fantasy Football 2013, I'm Brett Norton, and today we're going to look at the Miami Dolphins. For the Dolphins, a lot of buzz early in the season or preseason as they are expected to maybe challenge the New England Patriots for the division crown. Dolphins, a solid team. They did make some good additions to their roster, specifically Mike Wallace, the top wide receiver free agent that they signed away from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But looking at the fantasy perspective, they have Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback. Tannehill showed some great progress as the season went on, but still probably isn't a fantasy candidate that you consider drafting unless you are in a league that has two quarterbacks. And then he's one of a handful of others that you could throw in as a quarterback too. Bottom line is that quarterback is the deepest position in fantasy football, and you can much rather save your quarterback ammunition for the middle rounds and get much better running backs, especially and wide receivers earlier in the draft than later. At the running back position, the Dolphins have Lamar Miller. Miller showed some great promise as a breakaway threat last year for the Dolphins. He has replaced Reggie Bush as the main gun for the Dolphins running game. There's no real threat behind him. The Dolphins have a rookie from Florida, and Daniel Thomas, who is nothing special at all, behind Miller. So look for Miller to be, I wouldn't necessarily say a top 10 running back. He probably will go in round 3, 4, closer to 3 as a running back 2, maybe a very bottom running back 1, assuming he can stay healthy. At the wide receivers, I mentioned they have Mike Wallace. Wallace, the star free agent out of Pittsburgh, maybe the fastest guy in the NFL and certainly scares defenses to death with his addition that opens up the field for the Dolphins and certainly for Tannehill. And look for Mike Wallace to have a terrific campaign for the Dolphins as their primary receiver. If you can get him in round 3, 4 as well, Wallace should be a great benefit to you. On the other side, they got Brian Hartline. Hartline may be the only receiver I can remember that had 1,000 yards receiving in a season and yet only crossed the plane of the goal line one time during the season. Look for his numbers to be similar to that. He'll probably have to catch more touchdown passes, but he is not someone that you would want to take early. But again, if you're looking for a guy who can, especially in points per reception leagues, can add some value probably in rounds 10, 11. They also have Brandon Gibson, who they picked up from the Rams. Gibson had 5 touchdowns last year. Look for him to be a big slot receiver for this Dolphins franchise this year. And again, as a wide receiver 3 later in the draft is a solid pickup. Tight end is Dustin Keller. They picked up him from the Jets. If he can stay healthy, he missed half of last season. Then Keller is a solid tight end. Again, maybe someone you draft late in the draft, but tight end is such a difficult position to draft for outside of the top 2 that you really want to focus on specific matchups for tight end during the season. As far as defense and kicker, the defense is solid for the Dolphins. They don't really have a great return game, however. You could do worse than pick this team defensively, but they're not going to be one of the top 4 or 5 defenses in fantasy this year. And the kicking game is solid for the Dolphins. Kickers are a dime a dozen. You can always find a lot. I think the Dolphins are going to score enough touchdowns that they're really not worth looking at as far as the kicker goes. You can look at other teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars I already talked about, where they're going to be bogged down a lot, or even the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Dolphins simply are going to score more touchdowns than to make any sort of a kicker play valuable for the Dolphins. And I don't think they're going to score so many that like a team like the Broncos that are going to score a lot of touchdowns that they can bridge the gap between wanting to draft them and not. So for the Dolphins, we're going to take a look. Tannehill, maybe a quarterback 2, late round pick. Miller should go somewhere late 2nd, middle to early 3rd round. Mike Wallace, definitely around that same time frame as a wide receiver 1. Brian Hartline, somewhere in rounds 10, 11, 12, in that range, especially in point per reception leagues. Dustin Keller, you could do worse if you have to draft a tight end in your draft, but otherwise look for him during matchups. And the defense and kicker not really worth taking a look at as far as the Dolphins go.